Hi, this video is about the upcoming version 3 of Battle for Arda. In particular, I'm going to talk about unit abilities and related mechanics. Before I get into the actual changes, I want to provide some context. Back in the day, before I started working on this project, I enjoyed playing the medieval and fantasy maps that AAA had to offer. And many of them were pretty good, like the original Middle-earth map by Flanagan, which my project is obviously inspired by. However, most of these maps were plagued by one particular issue, namely that a lot of the units were very similar. The only difference between them was slightly different attack, defense, and movement stats, and maybe some of them provided +1 support to others if the mapmaker was feeling fancy. Of course, this was in part due to the limitations of AAA at the time. Because of this, one of my major goals when I started working on this project was to have a variety of units with a meaningful difference between them. So I added all sorts of abilities to units: armor, shield, leadership, charge, flanking, etc. This was innovative at the time, but I've realized that I got it all wrong. You see, I've made my units different mechanically. Instead, I should have made my units different strategically. Let's have a look at a few examples. The siege ability is a great example of an ability that makes units different strategically. Buying a catapult is a strategic choice. Whenever I buy a catapult, I essentially make a commitment that I will try to take a fortified city, or at the very least I will try to pressure one to force my opponent to defend it with a larger force. If I don't end up doing that, my catapults are going to sit there being next to useless. Likewise, if I ever see my opponent buy a bunch of catapults, I immediately know what they are up to, and so I can plan my counter strategy accordingly. The best example of the opposite is flanking. What strategic choice do I make by buying a unit that has flanking? Flanking kills ranged infantry, so essentially I'm betting that my opponent will use lots of ranged infantry. But why would my opponent use ranged infantry? What's ranged infantry for? Snugger skirmishers are a cheap offensive unit that's good in rough terrain. Rangers are a fast-moving, strong unit good at defending forests. Galadrim longbows are a heavily armored, elite heavy infantry. Dwarven extrawars are a thing, I suppose. So why do I expect my opponent to use lots of ranged infantry? Ultimately, it's just rock, paper, scissors. There's no reason to choose rock other than that I expect my opponent to choose scissors, and no reason to expect my opponent to choose scissors other than that I expect them to expect me to choose paper. There's, of course, a mechanical difference between rock and paper. Rock beats scissors, paper does not, but this difference adds no strategic depth. It's the same way with flanking. And so, flanking is no more. Another ability that shall not pass the bridge to the new version is Shield, for the very same reason. It's now merged with Armor, so Armor will now reduce the power of both melee and ranged units. Some units, such as Trolls, are still unaffected, because not every armor is made of mithril. Armor makes it much easier to reach a near certain victory in small battles, so while it's not much of a game changer, it's still an interesting ability, I think. There's one more ability that has no strategic relevance, and that is the range support bonus. I'm not sure what I want to do about it though. I certainly don't want to keep it in its current form, but I don't think I want to just simply remove it either. I've already talked about changes to charge and formation, but I'm going to explain it anyway. First of all, I've decided to rename formation back to Spearwall, because apparently I can't make up my mind. Spearwall is not a targeted attack anymore, it simply reduces the power of enemy charge. So, for example, if a unit with a charge of 6 charges, but the defending side has a unit with a Spearwall of 4, the charge will only have a power of 2. Another important fact about charge is that it is now affected by territory effects. Forests, marshes, caves and settlements disable charge entirely, while rivers reduce the power of charge by 2. Horse cavalry units will get an additional +3 power in plains. This plains bonus only affects horse cavalry specifically, so other charging units like war riders or Orlokhai get no bonus on plains. Note that while charge still happens normally in hills and mountains, most units that charge can't actually enter mountains. Another ability that is now affected by territory effects is Siege. Siege is normally rolled at a power of 6, but in caves this is reduced to a mere 3. There are also 2 entirely new abilities that rely heavily on terrain: Ambush and Scouting. Units like Rangers or Barrow Wights now have an ambush special attack that fires when defending. However, only a limited number of units get to perform an ambush in a battle. This number depends on terrain: 1 in marshes, 2 in hills, and 3 in mountains, caves, and forests. The numbers are additive, so up to 5 units can perform an ambush in forested hills, though no ambush can happen in a settlement regardless of the presence of other territory effects. Scouting counters ambush the same way Spearwall counters charge. Units with scouting reduce the power of enemy ambush rolls. Units with ambush are really good at small-scale resistance on difficult terrain. They won't stop major enemy offensives because of the limited scale and because they doesn't work on settlements. They are, however, very good at simply getting in the way, delaying enemy movements, being a pain to clean up, and just generally frustrating enemy plans. They are especially efficient at this because ambush is a first strike, so they will deal some damage even when hopelessly outnumbered. And if you don't want any of that to happen to you, you'll have to invest in units with scouting, such as rangers or carabine. There is also another new ability related to hero units, or characters, such as wizards or Nazguls. They were in an odd place because they were too valuable to use wherever there was any risk of them dying, so they were mostly used when the advantage was so overwhelming that their presence made no difference anyway. So from now on, characters behave like submarines. They can retreat after the first round of a defensive battle. This means that you can occasionally make use of them even if they are exposed to a counterattack. Note that they still need to survive the first combat round before they can turn tail and flee, so if the enemy is too strong, you may still lose them. Alongside with this change, the dual special attack is removed, because it doesn't work well with this new vision for character units, and also because it simply wasn't a very good idea. There is one more minor change. Some units, mainly elves, were previously unaffected by terror. While this was lore accurate, it was a bit confusing and just bad game design. I also felt a bit sorry for the Borog. So from now on, pretty much all units are affected by terror, with some exceptions, like walls and the Fire of Orthanc and such. I've briefly considered renaming terror to fear, because some people might associate the former with people shouting things and making things explode. I personally like terror, because I think that's the term Tolkien would use, but let me know what you think. Were you personally confused by this? So, that was a lot, but not all. I have plans for more abilities, though these are unique to 1 or 2 units. Mostly new ones that I haven't implemented yet, so I'll talk about all of that once it's more than just plans. So, that's it for now. There are going to be more videos, eventually. Till then, take care.